Hi everyone, it's Sarah Pacaro, rapid transformational therapist. I share a lot about narcissistic abuse because it's been my past experience with relationships, and I didn't know why until I got into what I do now and answered that question of why. This was not my experience, but it is the experience of so many people that I work with. You often marry your mother or your father. Weird, but it's true. So today we talk a lot about the men. We're going to talk about the women, narcissists, toxic women. So today's topic is 8 toxic ways that narcissistic mothers emotionally abuse their children. All of it is generational trauma. It gets passed on from one to the other to the other. And the toxic abuse from a mother can be very, very damaging. So today we're going to go over that. 8 toxic ways that narcissistic mothers emotionally abuse their children. So, our mothers are the foundation of our first attachment. When we are born, we are literally attached to them. We develop and we grow inside of them, and we're hardwired to find connection and avoid rejection. Part of that is because of the way that we grow. We are connected to another human. We're connected to our mother when we're first born. So as infants, we learn by example of how to bond with others in the way that we bond with our mother. We derive our initial sense of our self-worth from how our mother cares for us, how she nurtures us, how she protects us, and how she shields us from harm, whether it's good or bad. So, a mother's capacity to provide us with a healthy attachment, to tune into our emotions, and to validate our pain, our feelings, and to meet our basic needs become a fundamental part of us. They have an impact on our development, our attachment styles, and our emotional regulation. So when this initial attachment is instead tarnished by psychological violence, it leaves scars that last a lifetime. So emotional and verbal abuse by either parent, mother or father, obviously can hinder our learning, it can hinder our memory, it very much impacts our decision making and our impulse control in adulthood. It also heightens our risk for anxiety, for suicidal ideation, for addiction, for depression, the list goes on and on. So in an abusive, narcissistic mother, they set their daughters up for many, many things. They also set their sons up for inevitable danger as well, due to the nature of their disorder, of them being narcissistic or having toxic narcissistic traits. So their unsustainable need for control, excessive sense of entitlement, just like all the things that a male narcissist has, a female narcissist can have as well. This complete, stunning lack of empathy, a tendency towards interpersonal exploitation, and the constant need for attention overrides the welfare and the well-being of their children, you being one of them, because you were, at some point at least, your mother's child. Even if you're an adult and you're grown up now, even if you haven't talked to them for 30 years because you know they're toxic and you have gone no contact with them. So not only does the narcissistic mother fail to protect you early on from the terrors of the outside world, and we all know there are millions, she becomes the source of the child's terror. So rather than affection, that child gets exposed to unhealthy enmeshment, chronic rage, this crazy boundary breaking. You don't feel that you can set any boundaries with them because boundaries are something that are taught. And a narcissistic mother obviously does not teach their child how to set healthy boundaries. So any kind of narcissistic parenting distorts a child's self-perception. So instead of being given these building blocks as foundation of having healthy self-esteem, you begin to internalize as that child the nagging inner critic, the perpetual sense of self-doubt that this mother gives to you. It's like this, what is it? When you give someone a pile of shit and then you ring their doorbell, you set it on fire and you run away. It's a joke. It's like a gift that they give to you. But for them, it's not a joke. It's what they're giving to you. This narcissistic mother, you will notice, just like a narcissistic father, this erratic shift in emotions, almost like they're bipolar or something. They're ever conditional love instead of unconditional love. It's really difficult as a human to give unconditional love, but if it's to be expected at all, the one person it's to be expected from is from your mother, because you grew inside of her. So you'll notice that there's only conditional love, but the constant shaming tactics and this ruthless comparison terrorizes you as a child and creates this sense of anxiety where your safety and security should be. Instead, it's this perpetual sense of anxiety. So what toxic parents all have in common, whether they're the mom or the dad, is their inability to provide their children with a safe, nurturing, loving environment, which is what every child should have available to them. But if you have a parent who's toxic or narcissistic, you don't get that as a child. So if your mother or parent is narcissistically abusive, they are without empathy, and they're sometimes even without a conscience. So I get people ask me, did they know what they're doing? Like, are they aware of it? Are they conscious of it? So this type of ruthless behavior has a very dramatic, very damaging impact on early development as a child, and becomes the way that you navigate the world as an adult. So we're going to talk about the 8 toxic behaviors that the narcissistic mother specifically will engage in. This comes up all the time with clients that I work with. Yeah, I married my mom. Would you believe it? The person that I hate. So you will notice one of the first is that they chronically, not just shame every now and then, they chronically shame their children. So shaming is a tactic that the narcissistic mother uses to ensure that her children never develop a stable sense of identity or self-esteem, which is what you need to be a healthy, happy, amazing adult. But they ensure that they never develop this, to ensure that they never grow independent enough outside of seeking her validation or approval. They always want you looking to them for validation and approval. So the narcissistic mother will shame her children for not accomplishing enough. Maybe it's not enough academically, maybe it's socially, professionally, maybe it's personally. She will constantly shame them for everything. Maybe it's their choice of career, even after they're an adult and they've long moved out. Maybe it's the person they chose as a partner, their friends, their lifestyle, the way that they dress, their personality, their preferences, everything. All of these and more, you will notice come under the scrutiny of the narcissistic mother. She shames her children for acting with any sense of agency because it threatens her sense of control and power. Much like this narcissistic mother, you'll notice the same qualities in a narcissistic partner if you've chosen one as an adult. So by doing this, she instills in them this sense of never, ever, ever being good enough, no matter what they succeed, accomplish, and achieve. And this is the number one thing with people that I work with, is I just feel like I'm never good enough. And it's because of this. The second one is you'll notice that this narcissistic mother sets up very damaging comparisons if she's got more than one child. So if you have brothers or sisters or siblings, you will notice that she sets up really damaging comparisons among the children as well as their peers. So like any narcissist, the narcissistic mother engages in triangulation. You've probably heard that term before. So they manufacture these triangles. There's you, there's her, and then there's a sibling or a peer. And they create this triangulation. They destructively compare the children to their peers. They teach them that they fall short when it comes to terms of looks. A lot of times, if you're a woman or a female, it's around the weight. They're constantly on you about your weight, about your personality. You're not outgoing enough, you're not funny enough, you're not like your friends. Maybe it's you're not obedient enough, and look at your brother or sister, and they're good and you're not. They're always listening to you. Maybe it's what they accomplish or they achieve. You will notice that she unfairly pits 2 or more siblings against one or the other. They'll say things like, why can't you just be like your sister? Or why aren't you more like your brother? And they stir up this competition, this drama and chaos, and they might make one child the golden child, and they constantly are praising them, while the other child feels like the black sheep or the scapegoat. So this form of devaluation can leave a very painful imprint on you, and it causes the children to compare themselves to others as a way to evaluate their own self-worth. And then you'll notice the third thing is she treats her children as an extension of her. So the narcissistic mother micromanages and exerts this excessive level of control over the way that her children act and look in public. So out there in public, oh, we're so perfect and we are just the most amazing, beautiful family. But to her, just like to a narcissist, her children are objects. They are to be pristine and polished in every way. Otherwise, the narcissistic mother's reputation and appearance gets tainted. And over her dead body is that going to happen. So, although she criticizes them and treats them with contempt behind closed doors, in public, she shows her children off as if they're these prized possessions, and that's just, oh my God, there's nothing I love more than being a mother. You'll notice that she brags about, oh, little Timmy, he's so smart, he always gets straight A's, he's on the honor roll, and how little Stacy is just the cutest little girl in town. Yet, behind closed doors, when you're not in public, she's pouncing on Timmy with reprimands about what he has yet to accomplish, and then picking on Stacy's weight. No wonder you got issues when you're older if your mother is a narcissist, or either parent. But you'll notice the fourth thing is that when the mother competes with her children, it disrupts their transition into adulthood. And you'll notice oftentimes it crosses sexual boundaries. So it's very, very common for narcissistic mothers to compete with their children, especially their own daughters. The narcissistic mother is very likely to overvalue her own looks and sexual prowess. So what does that mean? So female narcissists, they exhibit this internalized monogamy and very, very often view other females, even their own daughters, as competition. How crazy is that, to view your own daughter as competition? But that's what they do. The daughter is looked upon with fury, jealousy, envy. Her own offspring is viewed as a threat to her. And as a result, you better believe she's going to devalue her daughter's appearance, criticize her body, shame her body, and on the other hand, some narcissistic mothers will objectify and expose their daughter to inappropriate age discussions about sex, or they'll flaunt their body. When I was in California this past weekend, I almost threw up. We were leaving the beach, and this little girl could not have been, I swear, more than like 13 or 14 years old, and her mother taking what I'm assuming were Instagram photos of her in this tiny little bikini, you know, that where the water comes down and you wash the sand off your feet. Her daughter was like under the water going like this, and her mother's taking pictures of her. I wanted to run over to that mother, rip the phone out of her hand, and smash it on the ground. It was repulsing. But knowing what I know about this topic, I can't make any assumptions, but that's the first thought that came to mind. And that is what toxic narcissistic mothers will do. They will flaunt their daughter's appearance, placing an emphasis on their appearance. And I was so enraged because I said she needs to be teaching her daughter that what is sexy is up here, nothing to do with down here. But you'll notice that they teach their sons and daughters that a woman derives value from her body and her ability to please men sexually. Oh, that's a big pill to swallow. But if the narcissistic mother has these histrionic tendencies, she may even seduce the friends of her children. This came up in a session with the client, that the narcissistic mother knew that the client's boyfriend, when she was younger, was cheating on her. And she flirted with the boyfriend every time he came over, and she was heartbroken. It was her first boyfriend. And she didn't tell her daughter because she liked the boyfriend more than her, because the narcissistic mother was jealous of her. So you'll notice that she may even demonstrate superiority over younger competition, even her own daughter's younger competition. You'll notice in other cultures where sexuality is far more restricted, where they have to cover up the body, the narcissistic mother may attempt to stifle her daughter's burgeoning sexuality and punish her for anything less than abstinent this has come up before too, if the mother finds out that the daughter has had sex, then she's calling the child a whore, a slut, and completely disowning her. Where a mother should be a source to go to talk about sexual things. How do you think she got a child in the first place? Come on. But she will sometimes fail to provide her daughter with the proper education concerning sex and her growing, developing body, when they develop boobs or when you start your period. She won't talk to them at all about it. That alone doesn't make a narcissistic mother, but it is one of the tendencies and traits. So the fifth thing is you'll notice this obsession with this external at the expense of their children. So to a narcissistic mother, their appearance is everything. Everything. So they construct this false image of being so sweet and loving and charitable all to others while gossiping about others and engaging in petty one-upping and abusing their children emotionally, sometimes physically and sometimes sexually too. It's not always from one gender to another. So she enjoys the social status of being a mother without actually doing the maternal work that a mother should do. So you'll notice that a narcissistic mom will show off her children without properly tending to their basic emotional and physiological needs. So to her, how things look is way, way more important than they actually are. And depending on her social class, the narcissistic mother will often enlist in the help of others to care for her children while neglecting to give her children the affection or attention when they're around. They withhold that, and we did a video yesterday about withholding. So she treats her children as nuisances rather than human beings that they are. And she may even be callous and cold to the point where she doesn't hold her children, she doesn't cuddle them, she refuses to touch them altogether, in appropriate ways, of course. You'll notice that many people who have had parents who are narcissists have horrible time setting boundaries, or they have guilt setting boundaries. That's because the sixth one is that the narcissistic mother engages in horrific boundary breaking. So at the other end of the spectrum, where the narcissistic mother can become so enmeshed with her children, so overbearing, and engage in this covert emotional incest, she makes her children the center of her world, and she makes them responsible for fulfilling her emotional needs. A child should not be responsible for fulfilling the emotional needs of their parents. That's crazy. So rather than taking on the responsibility of being an authority or a parent figure, she parentifies her own children, making the children, feel obligated to cater to her and her arbitrary needs, desires, and expectations. So she violates her own children's basic needs for privacy and autonomy, demanding that they know every single facet of their lives. They don't give their children any space or time to breathe. She might, what this looks like is an example of entering the rooms without knocking, or reading their diaries, or interrogating them constantly about their friends or their boyfriends or their romantic partners, or what they do when they're out, when they're not with them. So she keeps her children in a state of perpetual childhood. Even when they're teenagers, she treats them like they're 4 and 5 years old. She punishes them in a way for growing up. Whether that means punishing them for moving out of the house, making them feel guilty. Well, who's going to do this for me? What am I going to do when you're gone? Whether they get married, then they make themselves feel like the victim because their adult children are now grown up and old enough to get married, or whether it's going on a date or becoming aware of their sexuality. The narcissistic mother will always punish their own children and make them feel like they're the parent, this role reversal. And number 7, you'll notice that they become enraged at any perceived threat to their superiority. Like any narcissist, they're up here and you're down here. Any perceived threat to her superiority, you better watch out. The narcissistic mom is not like any other narcissist in that they feel even more entitled to have their own way and endures this narcissistic injury. This sense of superiority when it gets questioned or threatened in any way, just like any narcissist, as a result, is this emotions tend to be a psychological roller coaster. I've always described it as this feeling of riding on a big roller coaster ride in the middle of a tornado. That is what it feels like to be with a narcissist. And it's particularly difficult to understand when it was your mother and it's just the way it's always been. So, from the sudden outbursts of rage, you fail to obey her demands. And this abrupt love bombing, which just like a narcissist does in a relationship as an adult, occurs when they need something from you. When she needs something from her children, she'll sprinkle some love bombing in there. And there's very, very little consistency in the household with a narcissistic mother. You don't even want to go home. I've worked with clients before, they just really don't have a lot of recollection of their childhood, their past, but they just knew they never liked being at home. They liked being at their friend's house all the time, or when they were at home, they would go lock themselves in their room because their mother was just, yeah. She gets you feeling like you're walking on eggshells all the time. Every day is this fearful encounter of the mother's rage and punishment. And you'll notice the 8th thing with the narcissistic mothers, they emotionally invalidate. They give you guilt trips. This is part of the gaslighting. How crazy is it to think that a mom can guilt trip and gaslight her children? But they can, and they do, and it happens from a narcissistic mother. A child's reaction to the narcissistic mother's abuse is frequently met, just like anything, with invalidation, with shaming, even more gaslighting. I never said that. You're crazy. That's not what I said. You remember that wrong. The narcissistic mother, as any other, lacks empathy for her children's basic needs and fails to consider even what they are. So she's prone to telling her children, that never happened. I didn't do that. It is really common for her to say that the children are oversensitive or that you're overreacting to these horrendous acts of psychological violence. And it's just crazy. The mom has no qualms at all about using her emotional outbursts to control and manipulate her children. So when the children express any kind of emotion, she completely invalidates them and she redirects the focus to their perceived disobedience. Craziness. She provokes her children and statistically will put them down, belittle them, insult them, so those insults have staying power. It's all about the power of manipulation and control. Empathetic mothers are very in tune with the emotional welfare of their children, but narcissistic mothers, on the other hand, represent this privation of this maternal instinct, and this has deadly, deadly costs later on as you grow up. You don't just grow up and move out with like so many people, the women that I work with have. They're like, I knew my mother was crazy, I had to get out of there, and I got out right when I was 18. Now I'm with a narcissist and I don't know why. And so when you're putting it all together, that's why, because the mind will take you towards what's familiar and avoid what's unfamiliar. But to break this, you've got to go back and heal all those holes and gaps within your childhood and yourself. You've got to go back and heal all those areas from the damage done from that narcissistic mother if you want to break the cycle in your adult life now. So if that's where you're at and that's what you're looking for, I'm here. I'm ready to talk to you. And I hope this understands it's not just men. It's not a gender thing. There are plenty of women out there too who are narcissists as well. And then I don't have a lot of men on here, but for the men as well who end up marrying narcissistic women, their wives, it's very much the same thing. So I hope that this helps you understand maybe more about taking a look at your own childhood, and if you're interested in a way to heal from that, you got to go back and fill those holes in and basically reparent yourself. Parent yourself in the way that you were never parented. Unparent, reparent yourself. And that's what the journey to healing is all about, and I'm ready to talk to you about it if you're ready to go. So thank you guys for tuning in. As always, I will hopefully talk to you soon.